Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm Evan Jenkins, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for the United States Chamber of Commerce. I'm pleased to welcome you all back to Common Grounds. For those of you joining us for the very first time, we host this series regularly, and each time we invite a Republican leader and a Democratic leader to join us for a cup of coffee and a conversation for some bipartisan discussion about what we can do together to solve the nation's greatest and most important challenges. With us today are two distinguished members of Congress who have well-earned track records of working across the political divide, finding common ground, getting things done in their communities and for our country. We have Representative Fred Upton from the state of Michigan, first elected in 1986, and Representative Ron Kind from the state of Wisconsin, first elected in 1996. Well, this is kind of a unique moment because both of you were not on the ballot in 2022. As much discussion about that election there has been. So I just mentioned when you started Congress and you were both getting ready to leave Congress. And that's why I think this Common Grounds discussion may be more important than ever because you all have some incredible experience. Now, I think I see a member pin on each of your lapels. And not a lot of people know that that member pin actually has a number engraved in the back. Would you all mind sharing with us? And that represents your seniority. Remember, there's 435 members of Congress. What numbers are you all?
Well, just remember that the speaker, no matter who he or she is, and I was elected before Nancy Pelosi, she always gets number one.
Oh,
No matter what.
I didn't know that.
And so the first five in the leadership on both sides are the speaker, the majority, minority leaders, and the two whips. So the first five are taken, although Steny Hoyer was elected before me. But my number is number 11. Jimmy Lewis, who sadly passed away this last year, was number 10. Wow. It's alphabetical within your class. So John Lewis was in my class. So but my number is 11. So it's really, I guess, 6.
That's incredible.
Congressman, no one in this group.
Yeah.
I'm just number 41. And yeah, it goes fast, those years, and rising up through the ranks of seniority. But that's amazing.
It's that's only selecting an office in Rayburn.
Well, that's very impactful. Well, let's kick it off. And if you don't mind, just maybe share a personal sentiment, how you're feeling departing Congress after all, by my calculation, and I'm not very good at math, but between the two of you all, 60 plus years of service. Wow. What's a sentiment you'd like to share?
Yeah. Seniority first.
When it was redistricting that made the decision easy for us. Upton Middle School, which is in my hometown, is no longer in my district where I live. I can see Lake Michigan standing in my front yard, and Upton Middle School is now in a district that goes as far east as Lake Erie. So it's like not even a road connects the two. But I guess when I made the decision, it was my wife's words that made the most sense. She said, and they'll live happily ever after. I've got 2 kids, 3 grandkids. I've had a wonderful staff, a great journey, certainly in my 36 years. Never thought it would be that long. But it's relationships. Ron and I have been close really from the days that the two of us were elected. We've done some trips together to a couple different countries overseas, including the battleground of Iraq when Saddam was still in power, and we were with General Petraeus in a helicopter going down from Mosul. But a lot of experiences, know each other's spouses. Wolverines usually beat Wisconsin, so that's a good thing, which is my other pin over here. But we're good friends, and you gotta have those relationships if you're going to try to get something done. I learned under President Reagan, Republican president, Democratic Congress. He was reelected with 49 states, losing only Mondale's Minnesota. It's that type of tenure that I've always wanted to follow.
Yeah, and let me just say from the outset that if this Congress had more Fred Uptons in it, the dis and dysfunction would disappear pretty quickly. I've been a great admirer of the work that Fred has done throughout the years. He's got serious policy chops, tremendous production out of the Commerce Committee when he was chairing it, and even in his other roles with the committee. And he wasn't afraid to reach across the aisle and form those relationships and those friendships and work hard to find common ground. And that's the best way to get things done around here. There's so much common ground that could be had. The institution set up to separate us the minute we step foot in Washington. We have a respective conference and caucus meetings, whip meetings. We tend to congregate as party members, even on committee. And it's up to us individual members to figure out ways to break down those barriers, to get in the same room together, to get to know each other, to establish that trust, that relationship, and then find the overlap that clearly exists. And I think that the national media kind of portrays a bit of a false image of what goes on here on Capitol Hill. They tend to focus on the head button, the intense polarization, how hyper-partisan things are. There's a lot of good work that does get done that apparently isn't newsworthy. I think Fred in his whole career here is an example of that. I mean, the 21st Century Cures Act that you teamed up with Diana DeGette on was groundbreaking, revolutionary, and that's a gift that's going to keep giving back to the American people. And I guess that's our advice to new members coming here is work hard on that relationship building and get to know your colleagues and figure out ways to get together with one another and listen to each other. And I found through the years that by doing that, there's a heck of a lot of common ground that can be had and a lot you can accomplish while being here.
And let me just add, by showing yourself early as a workhorse versus, going out for the headlines or whatever, you'll get on the committee of respect that you really can make a difference. Ron and I, Ways and Means Committee, Energy and Commerce. Between the two of us, 80%, maybe even 90% of the major legislation, whether it be trade, healthcare, you name it, comes through our two committees. Some of it's joint jurisdiction. If you don't have that relationship, and for me, when I was chair of Energy and Commerce, Dave Camp from Michigan was the chair of Ways and Means.
Right.
We had a very good relationship. So, we worked together. That's the only way you get things done. But your work really from day one, the show of respect that you have with your colleagues, work with your leadership, will then propel you to be on a committee that really has an impact in your daily life, let alone your district. Everybody's got credentials to get on these two committees in terms of what's back home. But to do that, you get on the committee, and you don't get on as a freshman. But early on, you're sort of viewed as up and comer or not.
And Evan, from my perspective, I think one of the best ways to get this place functioning the way it should is work to empower the committees again and let them have the jurisdiction that they have and the responsibility. I mean, Fred mentioned our two committees, from Commerce to Ways and Means. We're on committees that we just don't have the luxury of failing. There are certain things that we've got to get done on behalf of the American people, and we got to figure out a way to kind of break through some of those barriers. But I've noticed throughout the years, and it's gotten progressively worse, there's way too much top-down management in this place. Most of the stuff coming out of the Speaker's office, I know we saw it on our side. The same can be true on the Republican side. And it's easier, quite frankly, to run the place, more closed rules, no debate, no amendments being offered. But you lose a lot when you do that because you're shutting too many other voices out. And that's never healthy in a democracy. So if I had one wish as we leave, besides getting our members to spend more time together, it's empowering the committees and get away from this top-down management style that's running Congress.
Yep. You all, with your incredible wealth of experience, two things. Number one, what do you see in this today, and I think the words were hyper-partisan environment? Having a narrow split in power is not something new. The voters in 2022 delivered 222 Republicans, 213 Democrats in the Senate, now 51-49 Democratic control. We've had narrow majorities and split power in the past. What do you all see different about where we are today than in the past? And how can we navigate in this, what is labeled as kind of a hyper-partisan environment?
Well, it's going to take working together. And our margin now as a Republican is exactly the same, I think, as what Nancy Pelosi had in the current Congress now. And she navigated pretty well. The real difference is we are now looking at the 24 election. We already have people that are running for that office. And it will, as they say, almost every election, but it really will ring true now. This next election will be the most important election in our lifetime. I mean, you've got control of the House and the Senate, and maybe a change in the administration. There's not a long window where you might be able to get things done before it really becomes all raising money for people running for office, and the conventions and the delegates and who's going to be the nominee and the order of the states. I mean, already the interest, the focus is there. So that window to get things done. What are we going to do on energy supply? What are we going to do on inflation? What are we going to do on the debt ceiling? What are we going to do on, all the spending different bills? And, we don't even know how we're going to finish this year's spending. We only got 2 weeks left on the legislative calendar. It's just going to be a jam-packed, very busy time. And for our side, the majority, they're going to have to figure out how to navigate this, particularly with the different factions that we have on our side of the aisle.
Yeah, I think Fred's right that the campaign handgun goes off pretty quickly in these 2-year cycles, especially when you're looking at a presidential year, and then things get bogged down pretty quickly. But I really do hope that this next Congress kind of embraces the innovation, the competitiveness agenda that can unite the parties, and quite frankly, the American people. We want to stay on the cutting edge of new breakthroughs, new discoveries, whether it's in medical research or technology or AI and robotics. And these things are happening at the speed of light. And there's going to be an important role for the chamber members to play with all that. I mean, contrary to some opinions out there, Democrats want to see businesses succeed in our districts, job creating, breakthroughs, making things, creating things, inventing things. So there's a lot of commonality that can be had. And I encourage the members of the chamber to reach out, establish those working relationships with your respective officers, House offices, Senate offices, get to know the members, the staff, and let us know what's working and what isn't working, and policy-wise, what they'd like to see us pursue. Because, I mean, that's where it really starts, is that advocacy back home and that outreach in our own districts that most members are going to be responsible. One thing I hope doesn't happen, that the new majority in the House just becomes a nonstop investigative party. That's all they want to do, is conduct one investigation after another with the White House. I'm telling my colleagues to embrace oversight. I mean, Democrats should not be afraid of more oversight when it comes to some of these big bills that are out there and spending projects, whether it's Ukraine funding, whether it's the infrastructure bill, whether it's the new CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. We have a responsibility to the people back home, the American taxpayer, to make sure these funds are being applied and used and implemented the way we envision it. And that requires oversight. We have a constitutional role as a co-equal branch to hold the administration responsible. So Democrats shouldn't be shy from that. But as long as it comes from that perspective, and it's not just a partisan gotcha game, I think there will be interest in doing more of it. But Fred mentioned trade too, and I've spent a lot of time on the trade agenda, making sure we have a proactive trade agenda. We have to get back in the game. I'm hoping in this next session we'll see Trade Promotion Authority advance along with TA reauthorization. They usually go hand in hand, but the rest of the world isn't waiting for us. We've got to get in the game. We've got to have the open for business sign clearly communicated with the rest of the world, especially in light of what China is trying to establish and where they're going these days. So a lot of this, again, comes back to a competitiveness agenda, and I'm hoping that there'll be a bipartisan path forward on getting trade back on the rails again and having us out there establishing those global trading rules that we've been known for, and that the rest of the world, quite frankly, is looking for our leadership on.
Ron, you're spot on. I just came from a meeting an hour ago, and we talked about trade. We had a number of folks from Japan and Portugal and other places, and they're just begging for us to be part of this. And tragically, the TPA expired.
Yeah.
And we got to renew that. That's the fast track to actually enter these negotiations. And the administration hasn't even asked for it to be extended yet. I came from a trip a couple of weeks ago. I was down in Southeast Asia. Our friendly nations there, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. It was just before the AGM conference President Biden went to. I mean, they're scared to death about China.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if we don't get our act together and be able to compete on a fair basis and reduce some of these tariffs, guess what? We're gonna be the big losers for this. So I hope it doesn't get caught up in this next election cycle as it did in 2016 when we had both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump say, "Niet."
Well, I was just a few weeks ago down in South America on a trade mission in Colombia and Chile, and they are desperate for closer trade relations. We have bilateral agreements with them already. We should be celebrating that and looking for more opportunity to expand it because guess what? China is on their door. Chile being the second biggest producer of lithium production and the importance of that with the high-tech and microchip economy that we live in today. And they want to do business with us, but we got to show up. We got to show that willingness to do it. And I'm glad Fred mentioned TPP, or the Comprehensive and Progressive Trade Agreement, now in the Pacific Rim. It is the fastest growing economic region in the world. It makes no sense that we're on the outside looking in. We help negotiate that. And I've been talking to the administration from the president on down that we need to find a path forward to get included in that again. And I think the template there, and again, with the help of chamber members, we put together a really good USMCA bill, a Mexico-Canada 21st century trade agreement that was modernized.
Bipartisan.
Huge bipartisan support. That could be a good template for what we can do with TPP so that we're in the Pacific region where all the other countries want us to be. And quite frankly, the structural reforms that we want China to make is contained in TPP. At some point, they're going to want to join. We're going to have enforceability provisions with that trade agreement. It's an opportunity for us to help shape not only the region, but hopefully shape China in a positive direction so it doesn't have to just be a hostile relationship in the future.
Folks, I hear the passion. You've seen it firsthand. You know the challenge. You are basically saying from the administration and others, we need leadership on this because the reality is so stark. Congressman Khan, you gave a great call to action. So many people watching Common Grounds, this program, they're small business people, they're in communities. And you said very clearly, get engaged, reach out. Can each of you all maybe share a little perspective about how small businesses can engage, can be that voice in your offices and to you to help move this ball forward?
Yeah, let me take a quick crack at that. I established a small business council, an advisory group for me. So I met them periodically, and there was a constant feedback loop, me getting information to them. More importantly, them telling me what they're up against, the challenges that they're facing, from supply chain bottlenecks to increased costs that they're facing, tight labor market. There's not a business, large or small, that I visit my district where the number one concern is where the people are. They want to hire up and the quality that they need there too, which is a big challenge for us moving forward. And demographics are working against us right now. We have 70 million baby boomers beginning their massive retirement. We have a messed up immigration policy that needs, again, to be fixed in a bipartisan manner. We have a declining birth rate in our country. Demographics economically is destiny. I mean, we know the two ingredients for strong GDP growth is workforce participation and worker productivity. When you don't have enough people participating, that's going to affect your economic growth, and all businesses are struggling with it. And establishing those relationships and getting that feedback from businesses, I think, gives the policymakers something that they can digest and realize the importance of moving forward, and the fact that we just don't have the luxury of failing as a Congress when our businesses are up against those huge challenges right now. And again, from my perspective, 26 years, a little bit less than Fred in the House, we want to see our businesses back home succeed. So we'd certainly encourage members to reach out and establish those lines of communication.
There's a lot of things that should be on the front burner for this next Congress to deal with, let alone this one to finish up on. But because we only have a couple of weeks, it probably isn't happening. Immigration reform is one. Frankly, it was Trump that said, Congress, do your job. Send me a bill that I can sign. And we never did. I mean, combine it with border security, help our dreamers. I mean, our farmers, and we both have rural districts here. But, the employment issue, there's not a business out there that isn't looking for people. You name it. Restaurants are closed early. They're closed some days. You don't, and you stay in a hotel, it's like, you got a clean room when you start, but don't expect folks to come by, if you're there more than one night until after you leave. But some of the other issues are on the tax side. So Pfizer happens to be my largest employer. They have invested in my district solely because of the tax cuts enacted in 2017, because we had the largest corporate tax rate in the world. We reduced those, we made it permanent, and Pfizer decided to expand in Michigan rather than overseas. I heard that from a good number of companies. And just this week, a $750 million expansion in Kalamazoo and Portage in my district. We have a huge issue in the next Congress because those personal income tax cuts that occurred, again, as part of the 2017 enact, expire the end of 24. So, and with that, of course, personal side, that impacts the small business. Your smaller small businesses that are subchapter S, right?
Yeah, the pass-throughs.
Yeah. So his committee. So if we don't extend those, guess what? Whoop, up they go. And you don't want to get to the cliff. Small businesses have to make a decision. What are we going to do? Are we going to expand markets? They want certainty. And I'm hopeful, even though I'm leaving, and so is Ron, that, as you look at maybe the debt ceiling or some other bill that has to pass, if you do something like that to send the signal early, I think you could get bipartisan support for that and take it off the table and take that uncertainty off. And let's hope that it's a major priority in the 118th Congress.
I think you're hearing today from Fred and myself, there's a lot of area that we can advance in the next session in a bipartisan way. And I think the challenge for the next Republican speaker is whether they're willing to allow this place to function in that capacity, and whether they're brave enough to bring certain pieces of legislation that will require bipartisan support in order to get it across. But if the attitude is adopted, and unfortunately both sides have been guilty of this, especially in recent years, that you're only interested in bringing bills that only your party can support and the other party won't, I see things breaking down pretty quickly and a lot of stalemate happening, a lot of things put in jeopardy then, like the debt ceiling or government shutdowns and things that are self-inflicted, and we should never go there, but they could be real possibilities if all you're doing is governing with a 218 mindset.
And you got to play chess. I mean, you might pass it by a couple of votes in the House, but how do you pass it in the Senate where you need 60 votes to even bring it up for debate? So, the challenges are big, and both sides have to work together, and not only our parties, but both sides of the Capitol.
We see that we have a lot of new members coming in, not historically high, but candidly a little bit on the high mark. We're almost 80 new freshman members to the U.S. House. Again, a wealth of knowledge and experience. If there's one nugget that you could share with a new elect who will be raising their hand, taking that oath on January 3rd and starting a really important chapter in their life, what would that piece of advice be?
For me, it's simple. Do not view the other side as the enemy that needs to be destroyed and can't be trusted. Too many, I think, in politics today view that dichotomy, that it's no longer good enough to have serious policy debates and differences of opinion on what the best direction of the country. That's what democracy is about. We should have those discussions. We should have those debates and that. But too many people now are adopting this attitude that the other side is a source of evil that needs to be destroyed. And that's a real poison that's infecting our politics today and preventing a lot of progress from being had.
Well, I concur with that, but I would also add, to get to this place where you can actually raise your hand and swear to defend and protect the Constitution, you as a candidate did a lot of listening to lots of folks over the last year, probably to your spouse, I would like to think. You did a lot of listening, and there are good arguments on both sides, let's face it. Now, I happen to come from a district that, with rare exception, has gone for the winner of the presidential election every 4 years, whether it be a Obama, whether it be a Donald Trump, whether it be a Bush, whether it be a Jimmy Carter. I mean, well, actually, Carter was the one exception. Jerry Ford won my district because he was from Michigan. But people at home, they don't really care if you have an R or a D next to your name. They just want the job done. And you'll find that it benefits you when, in fact, you can develop that relationship on the other side of the aisle and actually move the ball forward on something that impacts your district, our country. You shouldn't just be a rubber stamp because it's just trouble. So get to know both sides. Get to know your fellow colleagues for sure, but get to know and listen to the debate that's there, and not be afraid to oppose your party when, in some cases, they might be on the wrong page.
Well, that's just certainly well said. How fast 30 minutes go, we could go on, and I would love to pick your brain for hours. It was truly an honor serving with both of you all, and I just know what incredible service you all have provided, as I said in the opening, to not only your district, but to this country. We've got about 2-3 minutes left. I just really want to give each of you a moment to, again, reflect maybe what's an accomplishment. I know there are so many that you really want to kind of state that left your mark in Congress, a policy achievement, something back at home you're particularly proud of.
Well, I've got more years. I got a lot of stuff done, but I'll tell you, my mission was always under the Reagan model. And there was not an issue that I worked on that I didn't reach out to the other side of the aisle to make it bipartisan, because I knew that if we could do that, we could pass it and get the attention of not only the Senate, but also the administration. So whether it was tax credits for small businesses who had to make structural changes to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, whether it be a North American Energy Independent Plan, whether it be 21st Century Cures, expediting the approval of drugs and devices so that we could actually develop the COVID vaccine and produce it maybe even as much as a year earlier than otherwise it would have been. I mean, the auto rescue plan, saving our industry, saving our state, all those things were bipartisan. And who cares who gets the credit for it? It's the American people that we're fighting for.
Yeah, I am telling people back home, one of my proudest accomplishments as a member of Congress, and Fred, I think, shares this with me, is we were consistently ranked as two of the most bipartisan members of Congress. The work that we did, the legislation that we produced, we need more of that attitude at all levels of government today, but especially here in Washington. I'm proud that I created the Veterans History Project, a way to capture our veteran stories before they pass away. It's being archived at the Library of Congress. We have about 120,000 veteran stories now that have been told for future generations to never forget the service.
I did my dad. He's 98.
Yeah,
World War II, Battle of the Bulge guy.
It's incredible. I'm proud of the leadership I played in the Democratic Party to have a proactive trade agenda. That wasn't always an easy thing to do with my fellow colleagues on the Democratic side, but absolutely necessary for our country. We're one of the leading voices on delivery system reform, payment reform, and the healthcare system. So we get to value quality outcomes and not just volume healthcare, which is bankrupting all of us right now. And we have to keep driving the system in that direction. But the proudest thing that I saw in my years in office was the time when we had a chance to visit our troops in the field and seeing the job that these young men and women in uniform do for us, whether it was Iraq, Afghanistan, even Kosovo. I don't know if you made it to Kosovo.
I didn't go there.
But it's absolutely amazing that they do it. They're the best our nation has to offer. We send them these faraway places with weird names and long histories of conflict, and we ask them to do the impossible, and they do. And I wish every American had the chance, as Fred and I have done, to visit our troops in the field.
And we saw the burn pits, and we're so glad that we both supported that, and the president signed that into law to make sure that they had the benefits for those who were impacted.
You see that, and you see the greatness and the potential of America, and God bless our troops, wherever they are.
Congressman Kine, Congressman Upton, thank you, thank you, thank you. Such incredible service, such a powerful message. There's no better way that we could wrap up Common Grounds for the 117th Congress than with you two individuals.
Let me just conclude, Evan, by saying it was always good to partner with this guy because, you know, your name goes on the bill. It was always good to have a kind Upton amendment.
Well, very, very wise, very wise. Well, thank you both for joining us, and thank you everyone for participating and joining us in Common Grounds. As I said, this is a wrap for the 117th Congress. We are excited about the future. These two individuals have given us a roadmap for success in the future. Thank you again to both of you for your service, and we look forward to the future.
Thanks, Evan.
Thanks. All right, let me in.